Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast with your host, Dr. Tony Huang. Today, I'm back with Babak Hodjat. Babak, can you introduce yourself again?
Hi, Tony. Great to be back. Yes, I'm Babak Hodjat. I am the CTO AI for Cognizant, run our AI R&D team here in San Francisco. I have a PhD in AI, and I've been in AI all my career.
Fantastic. And for the viewers at home, Babak was on the show last year. So, Babak, what happened last year in 2023? What was the world of AI?
Very boring. No, just joking. Many incremental improvements to foundational models. Most of us saw this. Many people have actually experienced it firsthand. Foundational models that came out of the big folks, commercial models like GPT-4o, GPT-4o Mini, which is a smaller, cheaper version, faster version. We got Gemini, we got Claude, we got improvements in multimodality were significant. Some models that are inherently multimodal, which means it's not a mixture of experts. You don't have multiple models, each being an expert on a modality. By modality, for example, text versus images versus voice. But you have now models that are inherently multimodal. That means that it's one model that can understand all of these modalities at the same time, simultaneously, which is quite fascinating. For those of us who've worked in the world of voice-based interactions and systems, the speed at which, for example, GPT-4o can understand what you're saying and translate it into respond to you is amazing, because it's no longer going through that pipeline of doing a speech to text and then understanding the text and then coming back with a response. All of that is happening in one go. And we also had fascinating jumps in performance for open source models. Now, open source needs a qualifier. By open source, we simply mean that these models have their weights available. So these are large language models, they're neural networks. So the weights of the neural networks are available publicly. And so, for example, Llama 3.1 on some benchmarks does better than commercial models like Gemini and GPT-4, which is amazing. Like, we're getting to the same level of performance for models that are now widely available. They can be fine-tuned, they can be downloaded. And by that kind of debatable definition, they're open source. Now, having said all of this, improvements have been incremental. So we haven't had a huge jump in improvements on performance, but incremental performance improvements. Obviously, the expectation has been, as usual, sky high for these models. So those are just on the AI side. We've also learned better techniques as to how to use these systems. And an up-and-coming way to make use of large language models is agent-based technologies. So that is not widely adopted yet. There's a lot of research that's happening there. It's very promising, and I think will be the subject of a lot of work in the coming months and years, for sure.
Yeah, because I remember last year the big hot stuff was like RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. They finally, like, the community finally settled on that name like late last year. And so moving forward into 2024, we're seeing a lot of movement from companies trying to take their like POCs or learnings from last year and try to put it into production. What are you seeing in your world in terms of like clients and like other like companies and people that are trying to take these learnings and then trying to get ROI from it this year?
That's also been fascinating. There was a big inflow of demand for Gen AI, and not quite, even the clients didn't quite know where to apply generative AI models. And so in the beginning to mid 2023, we were doing workshops explaining what it is and why we're so excited about it, and helping clients identify areas where they might want to make use of them. That gradually moved to clients and customers understanding what it is and being very prescriptive, like, I need it here. Primarily starting off with low risk, high return use cases that were very much inspired by their initial interactions with AI, which is ChatGPT. Oh, it can write code, it has a text, very natural chat body interface. And so let's use it for support, or let's use it as a co-pilot for developer productivity, or it can do machine translations. So let's use it there. So very prescriptive about areas where they would like to use it. RAG, as you mentioned, became a huge application area where a lot of folks had lots and lots of internal data and they wanted some sort of chat GPT like interface into it. If you ask me, that's still scratching the surface of applicability. And one of the interesting observations there were that we had a very strong pipeline of relatively small POC to prototype level use cases. So large as far as everybody wanted them, but small in the fact that everybody did 2 or 3 POCs and they remained small. And for a few months there, we were scratching our heads saying, wait, why is this pipeline not growing? Like, why we're doing all these POCs? They are almost all of them are very successful, like all on all the measures that we set out to achieve. Why aren't they like growing as we've seen with past technology adoption? So I'm not sure what happened there. It might be because the technology was new, or it was harder to measure productivity, or the measurements weren't quite there, or as I said, we were scratching the surface of applicability. Whatever it was, we have actually turned the corner on that. So I'm happy to report that in the past few months, we are actually seeing many of those POCs resulting in larger deals, larger undertakings. And so clearly we've moved from, there was a little bit of disillusionment sinking, and there still is when you talk to some clients and folks, they're like, oh, we wanted to see 6x productivity and we're not seeing it. But we're moving past that now. So happy to see that, because as I said, expectation is usually quite high, but the fact is that we have this general purpose, very powerful technology that can be used in a disruptive manner in many places within the organization. And I think given the POCs have been so successful, one would expect further scaling of the adoption. And we're starting to see the beginnings of that.
So what type of like lessons did you learn this year? Like for instance, one of the lessons I learned was that even though there's generative AI, it's not really like a silver bullet that can solve everything. Such as, I'll give you an example. Like I had a buddy who like he's a non-coder and he's using Chat GPT, and he pings me and he goes, "Hey, I just built this like this interface without any like coding like knowledge." And I'm like, "All right, show it to me." And he sends me like a link and it says localhost port 8080. And and I'm like, "Buddy, you have no idea what's going on." So basically, it's for people at home who don't know what I'm talking about. Port 80, localhost port 8080 can only be accessed through your local computer, and it's not like you can't just send it off to the internet and then someone else can just click on it and see what you built. So you still have to have that knowledge, that gut instinct of how to build like products in order to use the full benefits of generative AI. Gen AI can't turn someone who has zero experience into Superman. You can supercharge like existing talent that has like the base knowledge on how to use all the different like tools and infrastructure, and then you can become a force multiplier. So that was a big learning for me. Like on your end, what'd you guys learn?
Yeah, that's very true. We've dealt with this problem of expectation. That's just part and parcel of AI. People thinking that, okay, it can do anything for me. And there's assumptions built into that example that you used as well. Like it seems like the AI is also assuming that the user knows that localhost would be like restricted to their own machine and so forth. And a simple follow-up can change that, can resolve that. But if you don't know, you don't know. Yeah, there is that. There is like where do you use it? How do you use it? And one of the things we've learned is that the generality of these models require us to actually give them a job description. It's counterintuitive. You think it's a model that can be all things to all people, but you have to, at the end of the day, you have to define, here's the scope, here's what you're going to do, and here's how you fit in the bigger picture of my workflow. And that has resulted in this whole agent-based perspective of making use of these systems. To start off with the example that you used, if I go to ChatGPT and say, write me some code, for some application, it will write you the code. But once the code gets a little too complex, you will get mistakes in it. The code it won't be able to write too long a code without actually running into some issues. And the poor thing isn't really running the code. It's just like understands coding to the level where it's actually spitting out some code and analytically understanding whether or not it'll work. Whereas a human doesn't operate that way. A human would actually write code, maybe write some unit tests if they're a good coder, and then run it, check to make sure the unit test is working, and then based on its behavior, modify. So there's this iterative process that happens. You can't do that with a model that you're just asking it to write code. You can do that with an agent where you're asking it to write code and then maybe execute code and allowing it to execute code in some container, and then feeding it the result of that execution and have it review that and maybe iterate on it until it gets it right. So that's the difference between being very prescriptive, telling the agent or the AI exactly what you expect from it and how to operate in a workflow. And you can, by virtue of doing that, generate much more complex code, ensure that the code is working, longer code versus what you can do with this general purpose system. So that's one of the things that we've learned. The other is how much do you actually rely on the analytics, on the world knowledge of these models versus giving them the tools to operate. Here's where you can actually run the code in a container. I'll give you the tools to be able to do that versus just write the code based on memory. And so all of these have pointed towards a world in which we treat generative AI models, large language models, as knowledge workers in a box. And underscore the box. The box is basically restricting it by telling it, here's what I expect from you, here's what you're gonna do, here's a set of tools that I'm gonna give to you that you're gonna be using.
In terms of like use cases, what are some like popular use cases that you've seen from clients?
Mainly the use cases right now are RAG, as we mentioned, various different types of RAG. Obviously, there's developer productivity, a lot of co-piloting, and machine translation, chatbots for support. But it's starting to move out of that realm a little bit into workflows where we string together agents to basically carry out with human in the loop some form of, for example, customer sign-ins or hiring process automation and various different processes that can be semi-automated with human in the loop. We're starting to see clients experiment with those use cases.
Based on all of your learnings this year, what are some like tips that you would give to new people who are interested in Gen AI? Like, where would they start this, especially with all of the hot stuff that's coming out this year, like new models, new infrastructure? There's the new agents that are coming out. Like, where would someone start if they want to get into their AI journey?
Yeah, one of the things that we've learned, actually, going back to your last question as well, in order to answer this one, is this transition. It's been hard for many of us, even those who've been in the AI world, this transition from thinking of AI as a piece of software that you code to thinking of it as a knowledge worker in a box. And it's not that we don't know how to do that. We know how to take humans, for example, and give them a job description and have them work in a workflow. It's just the mindset of knowing now that you can also do that with machines, with AI. Treat them as a black box. It is a black box, but humans are black boxes as well. And we know how to measure how they work, give them KPI, give them the responsibilities, and tell them how to work in that flow. So the first thing I would say is change your mindset from, oh, I need a lot of data and then I'll train this thing and it'll do specifically what I'm looking for. You don't have to do that. It's pre-trained. It will have a lot of reasoning abilities, a lot of common sense knowledge about a lot of different things. So you don't have to retrain the thing. What you do need to do is tell it what you need it to do and give it the tools. So when you start thinking that way, it opens up a whole new world of areas of applicability. So that's one thing to note. There's a lot of good resources online on learning about how to build these systems. You can even start by creating one-off agents like GPTs on OpenAI is a good starting point because it forces you to think of this system not as a general purpose chatbot, but as an agent. The next logical step would be to think of multiple agents and how they would work together in conjunction with humans in some sort of a workflow. And your use case better than anybody else. In your job, you are following a workflow where you are making decisions, you are using tools, data comes in, knowledge comes in, and you process it and move it forward. That opens up a whole world of applications that you can think about that you end up programming not by writing code, but by basically explaining to these large language model agents in your language. So the barrier to entry is actually quite low. It's as simple as I just described it. The inhibitor is us, basically, culturally, and just not being ready to think of AI in that manner, and always reverting back to, oh, I need to write some code, or I need my system to give me insights, and then I make the decisions. That kind of thinking we need to leave that behind and move forward.
So right now it's September of 2024. We got a couple more months left of this year. What's your prediction on the future? Usually 4 months is it's a short time frame, but in the AI world, it's an eternity. So like anything could happen in the next 4 months. What do you think about what's going to happen in the near future?
One of the things I see is this natural organic movement towards agent-based architectures and infrastructure. And if you've gone in and created your RAG chatbot interface for an app, and within your large enterprise, your organization, you actually have multiple of these, it's very natural, like it's unnatural to expect your users, maybe your employees, to decide which one of these chatbots to talk to now. And it's just so second nature to think, why don't these chatbots talk to one another? And so that I'm faced with one interface, but these chatbots are talking to each other and resolving what I need to get done. If you're using your intranet and your intranet is a collection of apps owned by different units within your enterprise, finance, legal, HR, what have you, and each one of those apps have their own chatbots. You want those to talk to each other and resolve any queries that you have. That's a natural movement towards multi-agent systems. And I think that what we're going to see, we are already seeing many of the hyperscalers, a lot of the AI companies think in terms of agents and work on platforms that are agent-based and bringing them out. There's one that we're also going to announce soon, where I think that will feed into people starting to think correctly about adoption of AI as a knowledge worker in a box in a community of knowledge workers that are collaborating to get stuff done. And I think you'll see some announcement. I'm already seeing, I think Mark Benioff just talked about agent force. So we're already seeing that kind of terminology seep into a lot of the platforms that are coming out. AutoGen is Microsoft's attempt at that. There's Crew AI. There are many. LangChain started off that way. I'm not sure if they're doing too well. They keep breaking backward compatibility, and we're pulling our hair out trying to use them. But they are the better, like, open source alternative. But so we will start seeing a lot of buzz around agent-based systems, and which would follow some adoption, which I think will break us out of this limited use cases of generative AI. And the technology that we have today is sufficient for agent-based. So it's not like that expectation mismatch that we've had with generative AI. I think we will get closer to what is the art of the possible today with that. It's hard to predict the next few months, but I think I'm starting to see some of that happening already.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with trying to take siloed chatbots that are specific to like a line of business and then having that talk to different chatbots in different lines of business so that you can have this nice ecosystem that is very traversable. That's like the best word I can give it. And I
Yeah.
also agree, like I love LangChain. I can't use it in production, write a piece of code and then leave it for 2 weeks and come back and that code, the exact same code would break
Yeah,
because like there's no maintenance on it. Like they really got to fix that because
they need to fix that. Otherwise, people will move away. And yeah, that's a major issue. We're running into that all the time, and my team is really not very happy.
yeah, definitely. And if you're listening, you can fix it, man. I love that product, but it's not stable enough. But yeah, so you said something about you guys have something in the works coming up pretty soon. Can you divulge on that, or is that still like top secret?
No, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to maybe talk to you in a month or two about this in more detail. But suffice it to say that we actually started applying agentification and multi-agent systems internally within Cognizant. We've started to actually use that on various different workflows, and it's starting to pay off big time from a productivity perspective. It's just amazing. The way we've done it, I think, is the right way to do it rather than switching from a human driven workflow to an entirely autonomous workflow, which is naive and which is the focus of a lot of agentification platforms that are out there. We've actually looked at what is the current flow and how do you agentify it with human in the loop and in a very principled manner. And it's paid off internally for us. The other thing we've started to do is actually start thinking about, okay, how do we agentify our own platforms? We have a platform called NeuroAI that allows us to build AI decisioning workflows. And by AI decisioning, I don't mean the AI gives us the insights and then humans make decisions. The AI is actually giving us decision recommendations, allowing us to run what if scenarios, and balancing between multiple business KPI that we have. So the actual decision making itself. And so we've agentified, that's the main subject of the announcement, plus some other good news there. It's coming out next month. And I can tell you, Tony, like agentification is like peeling an onion. You start putting agents in there and you realize that, oh, this next step too can be agentified. There's this other thing that I can automate now that I've agentified up to here. And it is you keep gaining productivity by continuously doing this. And I think hopefully I'll be able to demo this, show how we can actually build these use cases real time within minutes using the platform. So that's basically, I'm really excited. You can tell I can't contain myself. Really excited to talk about it soon.
Yeah, you know what? We are very excited to get you back on the show to demo that. I think that's
Definitely.
great to showcase what you guys have been built, and I think the audience is gonna love it. So yeah, to wrap it up, do you have a contact info if anyone wants to reach out to you?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm Babak, Hodjat. I respond on LinkedIn. Hit me up, and I would love to be in touch. And also, if you are on an agentification journey, it's I think of it as this sort of, it's a natural continuation of digitization where we consolidate the data, put it in a data lake. Now we move it to the cloud. Now we're moving all of our microservices and everything onto the cloud. And hey, now we're actually moving to identifying not just our software infrastructure, but also our human workforce is going to be augmented by agents. If you're on that journey or considering it, I would like to hear from you. And what are you seeing? What are you using? And yeah, that's all I think about these days.
Thanks so much for being on the show. Stay curious.